You're walking through a market street on an ordinary morning in the year 79 AD. Bread is baking somewhere nearby. A dog is curled up in a doorway. Wine jars sit stacked against a wall, waiting to be sold. Nobody around you has any idea that in a few hours, none of this will exist. Not the bread, not the dog, not you. In less than a day, this entire town will be sealed under volcanic ash so completely that it won't be seen again for nearly 17 centuries. How does a place just disappear like that? And how do we know in such strange and specific detail exactly what people were doing in the final moments before it happened? The town is Pompeii, sitting quietly at the base of Mount Vesuvius in southern Italy. To the people living there, Vesuvius wasn't a threat. It was scenery. Its slopes were covered in vineyards. Farmers grew grapes on its fertile soil without a second thought, because as far as anyone knew, it was just a mountain. Nobody living in Pompeii had ever seen it erupt. There was no memory of it being dangerous, no warning stories passed down through generations. That's the first thing worth sitting with. The volcano that was about to destroy an entire city wasn't even recognized as a volcano by the people living in its shadow. Then, on an August afternoon, the mountain woke up. Eyewitness accounts survive because of a Roman writer named Pliny the Younger, who watched the eruption unfold from across the Bay of Naples and later described it in letters to the historian Tacitus. He wrote about a cloud rising from the mountain that looked like nothing he'd seen before, shaped like an umbrella pine tree, spreading out wide at the top after shooting straight up. That shape wasn't just a dramatic detail. It told scientists centuries later exactly what kind of eruption this was. A column of gas, ash, and pulverized rock blasted so high into the atmosphere that it eventually flattened out where it met resistance from the air above. For the people in Pompeii, the first sign of trouble was that the sky started falling. Not rain, rock. Pumice, actually. A light, air-filled volcanic stone that rained down from that towering cloud for hours. Roofs began to sag and then collapse under the weight. Streets filled ankle-deep, then knee-deep, then waist-deep in pale, gritty stone. Some people ran. Some sheltered indoors, believing their houses would hold. Both choices made sense in the moment. Neither one accounted for what was actually coming. Because the pumice fall, as terrifying as it was, wasn't the thing that killed most people in Pompeii. That came later, and it came fast. At some point during the night or into the following morning, the eruption column became too heavy and unstable to sustain itself. Instead of continuing to shoot upward, it began to collapse back down onto the mountain. What came rushing down the slopes wasn't lava. It was something scientists call a pyroclastic flow, a fast-moving, superheated mixture of ash, gas, and rock fragments that behaves almost like a fluid, except it can move at speeds over 100 miles an hour and reach temperatures hot enough to instantly end a life. It doesn't creep. It doesn't give you time to reconsider your plan. It arrives. Multiple pyroclastic surges swept down toward Pompeii and the neighboring town of Herculaneum, each one bearing what the last one hadn't already covered. And this is where the story becomes almost too eerie to process. Archaeologists excavating Pompeii in later centuries found voids in the hardened ash layers, hollow spaces shaped like human bodies curled in on themselves. In the 1800s, an Italian archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli figured out that these cavities could be filled with plaster before the surrounding ash was removed. What emerged were casts of people in their final positions, a family huddled together, a dog straining against its chain, a man with his hands pressed over his face. These weren't sculptures. They were the literal shape of the moment someone's life ended, preserved by ash that hardened around them and outlasted their bodies by 2,000 years. Sit with that for a second. We don't usually get to see the last instant of an ordinary person's ordinary day, especially not from ancient history. Most of what we know about the distant past comes from monuments, temples, the writings of kings and generals. Pompeii is different. Pompeii gives us a baker mid-task, a guard still standing at his post, Loaves of bread carbonized but intact, still sitting in an oven because whoever was baking them never got the chance to take them out. And this is really the twist that makes Pompeii so strange to think about. The eruption that ended the city is also the exact reason we know so much about it. If Vesuvius had never erupted, Pompeii would have simply lived out its life like countless other Roman towns, slowly built over, worn down, forgotten under later construction, its details lost the way most ordinary history is lost. Instead, the disaster acted like a seal. The ash that killed the town also protected it from the erosion, the looting, the rebuilding, and the sheer passage of time that erases almost everything else. Pompeii wasn't destroyed so much as it was paused. For 1700 years, it stayed that way, buried and mostly forgotten, until workers digging a well in the 1700s stumbled onto ancient walls beneath the ground. What followed was one of the most detailed windows into daily Roman life ever uncovered. Political graffiti scratched onto walls, advertisements for gladiator fights, insults scrawled by bored teenagers, a wine bar with menu prices still visible. This wasn't the polished, idealized version of Rome you find in textbooks. This was Rome with its shoes off, caught in the middle of an unremarkable Tuesday. There's a common misconception worth clearing up here, because Hollywood has done a lot of damage to the story. Pompeii was not consumed by a river of lava creeping through the streets while people fled in front of it. Vesuvius, during this eruption, didn't produce lava flows that reached the town at all. The real killers were the falling pumice, the collapsing roofs, toxic gases, and above all, those blisteringly hot pyroclastic surges. In some ways, the reality is more unsettling than the movie version. Lava is at least slow enough to run from. A pyroclastic surge gives you almost no warning and no real chance to outrun it once it starts moving. Estimates suggest thousands of people died in Pompeii and Herculaneum combined, though we'll never know the exact number, since not every victim has been found, and some clearly managed to escape in the early hours before the worst of it arrived. Skeletal remains uncovered along the shoreline at Herculaneum, huddled inside boat storage chambers, suggest some residents made it as far as the water's edge, hoping for rescue by sea, only to be overtaken there instead. What's remarkable, looking back now, is how much this single event reshaped what we understand about volcanoes generally. The term plinian eruption, used by volcanologists worldwide to describe this exact type of towering, column-forming eruption, is named directly after Pliny the Younger, because his eyewitness letters were detailed enough to define an entire category of geological event. A man who simply happened to be watching from across the bay, writing down what he saw for a friend, ended up giving future scientists the vocabulary to describe one of nature's most violent processes. So the next time you picture Pompeii, don't just picture ruins. Picture a town that was living an entirely normal day until the sky turned to stone and the mountain sent something down its slopes that nothing built by human hands could have survived. And then, picture that same disaster, centuries later, handing us the closest thing we have to a photograph of ancient life, frozen at the exact second it stopped. Pompeii wasn't erased by Vesuvius. In the strangest possible way, it was saved by it, held in place so that one ordinary morning, 2,000 years old, could still reach us today.